What's your name?
Ron Goldman.
Could you tell us your job title and description?
Okay, I'm the director of the Modeling, Mapping, Consequence Production Center. And basically what some of the things that we do is do hydraulic modeling, look at some consequences of flooding, such as flooding houses or whatever. And then we also look at potential problems with dams and levees if they fail.
Okay. What role does the Corps of Engineers play in a flood?
Well, there's several things that we do during a flood. We look at our projects and decide is there some operational things that we could do from a project standpoint, such as open floodgates, close floodgates, operate reservoirs by shutting the reservoirs and lessen the water downstream. And then, of course, other things we do, we get into flood fight efforts such as levees or flood walls and things like that.
Okay. What do you think can be done for low-income housing during the flood?
Well, there's a couple of things you need to look at during a flood. Is number one, look at, is the area going to flood itself? Then if it's going to flood, then you look at what can we do to mitigate the flood. And sometimes if it's a large area of houses, there's potential you might could build levees or something like that to help during a flood. Or if it's just one isolated house, depending on the height of the flood waters, you might could do some sandbagging or maybe a ring levee or something like that.
In Vicksburg, were there houses that flooded that y'all helped?
There was quite a few houses that flooded during the flood, and mainly what we did during this past flood was provide technical assistance. And when I say technical assistance, we kind of estimated where the flood water was going to be, how high it's going to get, and when it's going to get there. And then there were some locals, such as school district or some local businesses and individuals. They actually did some flood fighting, and they was responsible for that themselves.
Okay. Do you enjoy your job?
Oh, very much so.
What's your favorite part of your job?
I'd say the favorite part is working with the different people around and helping people out in the public.
Okay, that's all the questions we have.
Okay.
And let me ask another question. During the flood, what role exactly did the Corps play with? I know that y'all did a lot of inundation maps that provided people with the location of where, you know, places going to flood. Actually, I was very impressed by that, because you get up to the minute results on that. Can you tell them a little bit more detail about what all USACE did with the flood?
Well, basically what we did, we looked at the flood. We actually did two things. The main thing we did was forecast how high the water was going to get. And once we kind of came out with a forecast, the Weather Service National Weather Service is responsible for issuing a forecast to the public. But once we come to a consensus of what the flood stages was going to get, then we did some inundation mapping and actually decided where the water was going to be and give the best estimate of where's the risk. And I don't know if y'all have got copies of what the Vicksburg Post put out during the flood. There's several good pictures in there of some levees that actually was built as a result of some of the inundation that we did. So down south of town, the Redwood School, they built a ring levee around it. And basically what we did, we took our inundation map and put it into a Google Earth so you could actually zoom in and out, and people could see where the flood was going to go. So that's pretty well what we did. And of course, we did flood mapping from all the way from St. Louis all the way to New Orleans as far as the inundation. And then of course, one of the major things we did a lot of preparing for the worst case scenario in case there was a levee breach somewhere. Where would the flood waters go then? And we did a lot of analysis on that and worked with the states for that.
Were there any levee breaches?
There was none levee breaches in our district or even in our region, but there was some private levees that breached up in the upper Mississippi and the Missouri River system.
But no USACE?
No USACE levees.
Very good. I was explaining to the kids how after the flood, trying to give them a little bit of history lesson, we went and saw the flood wall and saw where the water would have been if the levees had held in
Correct.
1927. I was explaining to them how after 1927 we had the Flood Act, which kind of, I don't know, not permission, I don't know is the right word, but kind of handed this over to USACE of saying, you got to come up with a way to prevent this from ever happening again. And it seems, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but it seems in my opinion the plan worked very well
Oh, it did.
for this flood, especially compared to 27. And the water, the amount of water was higher. I mean, it was a higher gauge level, but we didn't see near the mass destruction that
Well,
we saw in 27.
there was two things that during the 27 there was quite a few levee breaches. During this flood there was no levee breaches, and there was a lot of levees that was in place that was not in place during the 27 flood. And we actually have done some inundation mapping showing what would have flooded if the levees were not there and what actually flooded, and it's quite impressive. I think it's on the order of about 10 or 12 million acres would have flooded if the levees hadn't been there. It was only a couple of 3 million acres flooded with the levees. So it's pretty impressive.
It's very impressive. Very impressive. Any other questions, guys? If you were doing a project like that, oh, you got one, John Austin.
Do you like your job?
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
So every time you wake up in the morning, you're just ready to go to work?
I wouldn't say every time. I'd be lying. But, I put it this way, I have worked for the Corps for 35 years, and I have not, I've enjoyed all my 35 years of the Corps work. I have never had a job that I dread coming to work at. I'm not saying there wasn't days I wished I'd have been able to do other things. Of course, you know, I'd like to be hunting right now instead of up here at work. But there's, you know, all in all, it's if you got to work, it's a great place to work.
I see you're working on something over here.
Mm-hmm.
What are you working on right now?
Well, that's actually a levee system up around Greenwood, and we were looking at how we're going to do the analysis, because if y'all have done some research on your flood proofing, you probably know that FEMA does some flood insurance, and they actually certify for flood insurance what they call a 1% chance of flood or 100-year flood. And this is a levee system that we were doing the H&H analysis on to see if it was going to be certifiable from a FEMA perspective. So that's what we were doing there.
That's a very good question.
And most of the houses that are destroyed in Mississippi, are they mostly done by floods or tornadoes?
When you say destroyed, I would say total destruction. Tornadoes probably, but you have a lot of houses damaged, and I would say that you probably have more houses damaged as a result of floods than tornadoes.
What kind of, if some of these guys were interested in engineering, what would you recommend them take as far as classes in high school or college, or getting prepared?
Well, to get prepared, the thing that you need is your basic courses, but if you get an opportunity to take some advanced maths and some advanced sciences, physics, you know, things like that, I would definitely recommend that. That just get you prepared. And of course, once you get into engineering school, you go through all of these math and science courses, but then you get into the specialized course. I'm a civil engineer, so we get into specialized civil engineering courses, and you use that stuff as basic building blocks, kind of like just, you know, you got to understand how to add before you can do other things. You know, it's just a building block, and you will learn how to do it. And then even in college, you're just going to learn more building blocks. When you get out and get into the private sector or the public sector, which I'm in, you will actually learn how to do your job. It's kind of like everything you're doing, you're just learning to be able to do something with what you got. But all of that's just kind of like, you know, you've got to learn how to spell before you can write a sentence. You got to learn your English before you can get your phonics and and get all of your verbs correct. You know, it just all build on each other, and it's just engineering the same way. But your maths and your science is your building blocks, your major building blocks. But engineers, your English is just as important, because everything we do now is written. In the old days, when I was coming up, it wasn't quite as important, because I had secretaries that would take and proofread and do everything. But now everything's so automated and so electronic. You sit down, you type up your own report and everything. So you got to make sure it's done correctly, because you send it out, and you don't have secretaries, you know, and people like that proofing it as much as you would in the old days, because I send out more information electronically, informally, than I ever do formal writing. You know, where it actually go through a formal secretary that she reads it, put in the right format, and all that type of stuff. So it's and of course the biggest regret that I have personally as an engineer, when I was coming through school, there was no such thing as a computer class where you learn keyboarding. So when I sit here and type, I do this, you know, 25 words a minute instead of being 50 to 60 words a minute that you kids learn when you probably have at keyboarding.
They're all in it right now.
In keyboarding right now.
They all hate
And
it.
they've probably done cover the keyboard up for you so you can't see it.
That's right.
So, you know, just take advantage, because that's your basic building blocks of anything you do now, is being able to communicate and type, and it's all not going to be on a phone where you're texting. It's just going to be more on a computer.
Any other questions? Y'all be good? Okay.
Well, thank you for meeting with us today.
Glad to. Glad to see y'all interested in something that got an engineer intent to it. And what about if any of you have thought about engineering as a career? All right. But you know, I would say that it's a real good occupation. There's a lot of opportunities out there. You can do a lot of things. But you know, a lot of times in engineering school, people that go through engineering school, they then become doctors, they become lawyers. You know, it's just a good basic building block. I had a daughter that went through engineering. She was planning on being a dentist, but when she got through engineering school, she decided she had enough school, so she's an engineer today instead of a dentist.
And sometimes you go to engineering school and still don't do engineering.
Oh no.
There's a lot of times like that you move up into management and other things where you don't do the actual engineering every day.
Well, I saw a statistic somewhere where only about a third of the engineers is actually doing engineering work. An engineering degree just gives you opportunities to open doors that you get involved into a lot of different things. There's a lot of engineers in sales, engineers in management, engineers in project managers, and it's just engineers doing, you know, everything. So it's
mainly a
just open the door. Open the door.
Yeah, I was showing them the earlier about the job opportunities in STEM of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. That's the only field that has not been hurt by the recession. It's the only field that has actually seen job growth in the last 3 years. And I was telling them that we have several positions that we've looked for people and we haven't hired because we haven't found anything. I mean, it's just a lack of people in that field, that particular field.
Well, during this recession that's been going on for a couple so years, I've hired actually about 12 engineers in the last 2 years. So, you know, it's a profession that just there's always going to be demand for.
Right.
And any science technology type profession is going to be there.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.